we will have a 15-minute briefing, followed by a Q&A session of 15 minutes, equally reparted. But you can already write your questions in the chat box during the briefing, and we will give you the floor after the briefing to ask the questions to the Lieutenant Colonel. Just try to remain in mute during the briefing and until we give you the opportunity to ask the question. So now, Jonathan, the floor is yours to start the briefing.
Thank you very much, Yossi. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being on the line with the call here. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules and availing yourself for this briefing. And it's a sign of course, your interest in getting verified information from the source. We are more than 45 hours into Operation Guardians of the Wall, which started with a Hamas rocket attack at Jerusalem and has been going on now for, as I said, more than 40 hours. During those hours, Hamas and the other terrorist organizations in Gaza have fired more than 1,100 rockets towards Israel. I'll repeat the number, 1,100 rockets. Unfortunately, at this stage, we have Israeli casualties. There are 5 Israeli civilians that have been killed by this aggression, and there are more than 200 Israelis who have been wounded at various levels of injuries, some of them severe, some of them light, and some of them only trauma. Unfortunately, I can also now share with you that we have one combat casualty from the IDF, an Israeli soldier who unfortunately died. His vehicle was hit by an anti-tank missile in the northern part of the Gaza Strip, and there were 2 additional Israeli soldiers wounded, one severely and one moderately. That's the situation in terms of numbers. An interesting and very important figure that I think all of you should be aware of, which is abnormal relatively to other previous rounds of escalations that we've had with Hamas and the Islamic Jihad, is the rate of rockets that are malfunctioning, fired by terrorists in Gaza and falling short and exploding inside the Gaza Strip and leading to civilian casualties inside Gaza. We think that Hamas is trying to blame Israel for those casualties, when in fact many Palestinians, at this stage I cannot say exactly how many, but many Palestinians have been wounded by those rockets falling short. More than 200 rockets have fallen short inside the Gaza Strip. In terms of our operations, the IDF has been, of course, first and foremost engaged in active defense using our Iron Dome, our amazing and life-saving system that so far has intercepted more than 90% of the incoming rockets. Out of those 1,100 rockets, 200 have fallen short. Another number of rockets have fallen in open terrain. We don't try to intercept them, but then a large number of rockets were destined to impact in Israeli cities. Those we try to intercept, and out of those we try to intercept, 90% of them were indeed intercepted. In terms of other efforts, of course, we haven't been sitting idly by and waiting for the world to solve our problems. We are actively engaging against Hamas and the Islamic Jihad. We are attacking military targets, and I stress the word military. We're attacking terrorists. We're attacking their infrastructure. We are attacking their warehouses. We are attacking the terrorists themselves, wherever they are, all across the Gaza Strip. And just for the last few hours, we have made public a number of significant strikes, whereby we have killed senior Hamas and Islamic Jihad commanders. You could make the equivalence of the general staff of Hamas, the most senior military leadership that we've been able to kill, quite a few of them lately, and we're going to make official the names of those senior Hamas commanders. In addition, we have taken out leaders in the anti-tank missile unit belonging to the Islamic Jihad, as well as the rocket unit of the Islamic Jihad and additional operatives on the ground. And that's, of course, very significant. In addition to that, we are attacking their infrastructure. We have chosen to attack military targets. And I stress again, we're attacking military targets that are buildings that are used by Hamas and the Jihad in populated areas inside Gaza, different neighborhoods, the Rimal neighborhood, to name one example, where headquarters and staff buildings used by Hamas. These are buildings that are 10 and 11 stories high, and we have made specific preparations and precautions in order to clear those buildings of non-combatants, of civilians, by ways of warning fire, and then also phone calls in order to warn the people who are there. And only after we knew that these buildings were safe to attack, no non-combatants there, did we attack them. And as an evidence, there were no civilian casualties in those attacks, which is important. We are aware of the criticism, and I know that you will ask questions about it, so I'll save you the question. We are aware of the sensitivity, of global sensitivity, and the global eagerness to criticize Israel with regards to civilian casualties in Gaza, specifically women and children. We are also aware of the fact that the terrorist organizations that we fight against are shrewd media operators, and they will leverage each and every civilian casualty, especially if it's women and children, in their benefit, and they will use the international media and global condemnations for their benefit. Out of that understanding and out of our commitment to international law of combat and our morals as a Jewish military, we try our best to strike military targets and combatants only, and to limit to the greatest extent possible any damage to non-combatants. And we see it as a very important thing for various reasons, and we are doing the utmost in order to minimize the casualties. And when you listen to numbers of casualties in Gaza, first of all, bear in mind that the organization that disseminates the figures is not a non-partisan organization. It is the Ministry of Health of Gaza, as in under Hamas command. That's one thing to remain careful of. And the second thing is that they are, as I said, trying to bundle up casualties and to pin casualties on the IDF instead of on Hamas rockets and Islamic Jihad rockets falling short inside Gaza. To summarize, before we do a few questions, in terms of where we are going, the IDF has mobilized a few thousand reserve forces mostly for staff positions in order to enhance our headquarters and to continue to sustain our activities. We have mobilized a full battalion of Iron Dome in order to enhance our capability to intercept the almost endless barrage of rockets that our civilians face. And we are, of course, preparing ourselves for various contingencies. Our marching orders are to continue operations, to prepare to expand our operations. And at the end of the day, we want Hamas to understand that their aggression against Israel is totally unacceptable, and that they will be held accountable for their aggression against us. You'll see questions. I can't hear you, Yossi.
Thank you, Jonathan. And we will open the Q&A session. So just try to remember that Jonathan is an Israeli officer of the IDF. Therefore, he cannot answer political questions. And try to ask short questions so we can have as many as we can, as many questions as we can in the remaining time. So we have already a lot of questions in the chat box. We will start with the first one, from a German journalist from, let me see. Yeah, the first question is from Daniel Siepel. So Daniel, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hello, thank you for the briefing so far. My question is, how do the terrorists in Gaza get their rockets according to your IDF insights?
Basically, two ways. One is by smuggling rockets via Sinai in tunnels in Rafah from the Egyptian side into Gaza. They have basically a highway network of tunnels, smuggling tunnels, most advanced in the world, with rail systems, carts, and even some of them are big enough for small trucks to cross. And I've seen that personally many years ago when I was a company commander in infantry. And the other way that they have, and that is now the biggest part of their quite massive arsenal, is home production, produced in Gaza, rockets that they are producing, since they are quite simple in their design. They are capable of developing by themselves. The seed, to use a civilian term, in the Gaza rocket industry was, no surprise, an Iranian seed, and there has been significant Iranian involvement in terms of knowledge and know-how. Iranian engineers from their military industry have assisted Hamas and the Islamic Jihad in these production endeavors. So the majority of the rockets are homemade, and there are also standard. They also have standard grade rockets that they have procured from various sources, some of it from Iran, but not only from Iran, that they have been able to smuggle into the Gaza Strip.
Thank you, Jonathan. So now the second question goes to Umberto Gambini from the European Parliament. Umberto, please unmute yourself.
Thank you very much. And nice to see you again, Jonathan. We met last year, and it was very useful to be on the ground with you. I wanted to ask you, how much does the IDF think that Hamas has as a rocket reserves from Gaza? And the other question is, do you see a front opening in Lebanon with Hezbollah? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The feelings are mutual. So Hamas, unfortunately, has been allowed to stockpile a total amount, according to our intelligence estimates, of around 30,000 rockets and mortars. Together with the Islamic Jihad, that is the estimate of the amount of rockets that exist in Gaza as we speak. Those are, of course, massive numbers. I think that's firepower similar to some small European countries, unfortunately. And that's the situation. So you can deduce from that that they have significant ability to sustain these operations. And of course, it leads us to the understanding that this isn't about for how long can they, or how many rockets do they have, but this is also about the consequences that they will have to suffer, and that they're already suffering, in terms of infrastructure, personnel, and facilities and their weapons, that we are making them pay. Second part, of course, that is always a relevant part. We are looking towards the north. We are listening, monitoring the situation very vigilantly, knowing that when one terrorist organization starts shooting, that may inspire others to do the same thing. And we are vigilant about it. So far, the situation along our northern borders, both the blue line with Lebanon and on the Syrian front, are relatively stable.
Thank you, Jonathan. The third question goes to Konstanty Gerbert, a Polish journalist.
Morning, Colonel. What proportion of those 30,000 missiles do you estimate were smuggled in, and as compared to locally produced? And could you give us an estimate of how much it costs to produce a typical Hamas rocket in Gaza, as compared to the anti-rocket missile of Iron Dome cost?
At this time, unfortunately, I don't have enough detailed information, and I always try to be as precise as I can, but I'm sorry to disappoint. I don't have that ratio of how many. I know that the majority are homemade, but I do not know at this stage how many. And unfortunately, the second question as well, it's a huge disparity. We're talking about dozens of dollars, maybe less than 100, and dozens of thousands of dollars for our Tamir interceptors. But I think that it also tells a story of priorities. Our priority is to defend our civilians. and the best and brightest minds in Israel came together with the brightest minds of the US and developed this amazing system, the Iron Dome, which has proven its worth 100 times over, and including today. It is expensive, very expensive, to fire interceptors at very crude and basic rockets that are fired at our civilians, but each one of them is worth it many times over because we know that we're saving lives.
Thank you, Jonathan. Now we'll give the floor for the fourth questions to Pedro Bilar. Pedro, please unmute yourself.
Shalom, Jonathan. I know that you cannot, I think you know that you cannot differentiate nowadays between firepower in a war and the soft factors. And my question was, the world doesn't know that Hamas is so inhuman that they don't care whom they kill. Because in Lut, they killed an Arab father and his daughter, an Arab Israeli. Why isn't this fact publicized more heavily? Thanks.
Yeah, it is. You know, I share the frustration because I am one of those in Israel who disseminate the information to the international media and then see how it is reflected in the media. And the fact that, let's go even bigger, they fired rockets at the third holiest site to Islam, the most holy city to Judaism, a holy site for Christians, and the third most holy place in the world for Muslims, and they're firing rockets at it. They have complete disregard for human life, whether it's Palestinian human life, Israeli human life, or any other. And I think that it's appalling that media coverage puts Israel and Hamas on an even keel, and that there's a certain parity between the military of a democratic country, one of the few in the area, and a bloodthirsty jihadi terrorist organization. I think it's very regrettable, and I think that anybody who has a voice and the ability to influence how Hamas is perceived and what kind of international support and legitimacy they have should speak up and act against it.
Thank you very much. The next question goes to Colonel Andreas Jodeke from the Center for International Peace in Berlin.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Colonel, for your briefing. As we speak, we have personnel in Jerusalem and in Tel Aviv, and of course they are under fire as everybody else there. My question would be, we know about the enormous number of rockets, mortar rounds they have in the area, but what we see right now is the IDF reacting more to an attack and then attacking the opposite forces. Do you consider something just like preemptive strikes, proactive strikes against known launch sites, against C2 nodes, or even headquarters? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Colonel. We're doing all of that, actually. And if you've followed our latest releases, so the fact that we are hunting terrorists, both anti-tank
I think we have a problem of connection with Jonathan. Right, I'm going to try to repair that. Wait a second, we are trying to take care of the problem. Well, until the colonel will reconnect, I suggest to give the floor to David Siegel, the president of Felnet, David, please take the floor for a few minutes until Jonathan will reconnect.
Yes, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us. You all know that we're in an emergency situation in Israel. I could just add that if you look at the map, you will see that Hamas and the other terror organizations are really trying to cover almost every region that they can in the country, from the south to the north. And this is only expected to get worse. And you're also going to see very serious IDF countermeasures in Gaza. So we believe very much that it's important that European officials understand what is at stake. This is rocket fire at civilians from civilian areas in Gaza. And as the colonel said, Israel needs to be very careful, and knows that it needs to be very careful in the way it conducts itself. Unfortunately, the other side, the terrorist organizations, are not being careful, and they're purposely targeting civilian areas all over the country. And there's a major ultimatum in the next hour for another round at central Israel. So this is very serious, and what we hope and expect from European leaders is expressions of understanding, support, and backing, because the only way to solve this situation is by conveying a message to Hamas that this is unacceptable by the international community. So this is what this is all about, and we'll be following up with information to our network and to officials in Europe as well as we can. And again, we are as concerned as everyone else about the welfare of people on the ground in the Middle East. But the first responsibility is to protect civilians that are under rocket fire indiscriminately. Okay.
Okay, I think Jonathan is back. Jonathan, can you hear us? Jonathan?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Great.
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah. So please take the floor.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry for the lost connection there. But I am back. Okay, could you let's go to the next question.
Okay, so the next question is from Noah Schaeffer. Please, Noah, unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hey, hi, good afternoon. Here's Daniel and Noah. Jonathan, shalom. We met in Washington last year. So good to see you folks. You already have our questions, so we keep the floor open for the next one, but saying all our prayers, our love are with you guys, with the soldiers, with Eretz Israel, our families and friends. Take care in these difficult times. We love you all, guys.
Thank you very much. Toda.
Okay, so the next question goes to French journalist Matteo Ghisalberti. Please, Matteo, unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, Jonathan. Hi, Yossi. Thank you very much for this invitation. You already replied to some questions about the media position in Europe. But actually, do you think, so I changed a little bit my question. Do you think that Hamas is trying to influence European media in this moment? Because actually, if we watch the French TV or the Italian one, the ones I can see, we hear very few information about Israel, and we have the impression that Hamas is a subject who is trying to defend themselves against Israel.
Yeah, I think Hamas is very good at manipulating the media. I think Hamas has lots of experience in media warfare. I think that they've proven this many times over in routine activity, as well as in previous rounds of fighting that there's been. And I also think that many media outlets and correspondents and editor do the bidding of Hamas, and they choose the narrative that Hamas presents. They choose which facts and which events to highlight and how to highlight them. It's very evident everywhere which pictures are chosen for the first page, what kind of B-roll runs in the background while the reporter tells the story of what's going on, what's deemed important and what isn't deemed important. And in general, I think that they enjoy lots of free and unquestioning journalism And again, what troubles me a lot is the fact that for some absurd reason, Hamas and Israel are put on an even playing, and they're portrayed as if they're two equal entities with the same values and should be treated equally, and both sides are legitimate. I think that's absurd. And another thing that I have an issue with is the fact that so many times the chronology of events is overlooked, whereby things will happen on the ground, rockets will be fired at Israel, and only when we retaliate will international media say Israel is attacking Gaza, many times omitting that there are rockets fired at Israel, and many times not saying that they are the ones who started firing and we are the ones responding to their aggression. I'll have time for one last question.
Okay, there is. Try to do two last questions because you were you arrived 5 minutes late, so we need two next questions. So the next questions will be from Madalena from ALPI Portugal.
Yes, hi. Thank you very much to do so many things for Israel. I would like to know, how is the Israeli population, citizens of Israel, but Arabs, behavior about this conflict?
Yeah, thank you. So in short, it's an area that is not under my responsibility, but I do want to give you an answer. And it is, we have challenges in this topic. The Israeli police has reinforced its capabilities with 9 new companies from the border police. These are units that used to be attached to the IDF and operate inside Judea and Samaria. And because of the severity of the situation in various parts of Israel, they are now operating under Israeli police because there's been significant unrest. There have been violent riots and acts of violence against Israeli civilians and against law enforcement agencies. So that's definitely something that we see is going on. We see active incitement by Hamas urging Arabs in Israel to participate in these violent riots, which is very unfortunate.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Jonathan. We'll give now the floor to Stephen Levine. Please, Stephen, unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you. Actually, my question was asked about being preemptive versus reactive, but then you cut out. So I think you said something to the effect that you are being preemptive. But my concern, and I'm not challenging the efforts, but my concern is there more that can be done ahead of time so that we don't have to, by hitting some of these rocket launching installations, even though we know they're mobile as well as fixed?
So what I can tell you with that is that now, once kinetic activity is ongoing and there is fighting ongoing, we are acting and striking a lot of targets that we have collected intelligence on for a long period of time. And as I said, more than 300 military targets in Gaza have been struck. All of those targets weren't generated over the time span of 24 hours. So this is intelligence that we have collected, assessed, vetted, and turned into military targets. A lot of that are storage facilities, production facilities, and many other things, with the aim of improving the security situation for Israel for the day after this current round of fighting ends.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we'll give do you have time for 2 more questions, or will it be the last one, Jonathan?
No,
so we'll
I'm sorry, Yossi, I have to move on. I have to move on. Sorry, I have another engagement. I thank you very much, Elnet, as always, outstanding, and I thank everybody who participated, and I wish you all the best. Shalom. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you very much. So I will give back the floor to David Siegel for the conclusion. Please, David.
Thank you, Yossi, very much, and the whole team for putting this together so quickly. We will continue to inform you. We will also send out a recording of this event to our list, to our contact people, and we'll continue doing the advocacy work that we need to do and the education work that we need to do on the ground. Please stay with us as we go through this crisis together. Thank you very, very much to everyone.